Well, I want to welcome everyone, and um, I thought I would offer some words of reflection first and then meditate. So today I actually want to talk about self-reflection and how crucial it is to the path. And of course, I'm sure that all of you use self-reflection. It's pretty natural given what the Buddha taught. And it's one of the great things about having a human birth, because we can actually look at our own experience, reflect upon it, and make better decisions, choices about how to live and how to train ourselves. And of course, this isn't self-reflection isn't just in Buddhism. I mean, we have the famous quote from Socrates, an unexamined life is not worth living, without going too much into detail about what was going on for him at the time, just thinking in general about how important it is to really look at our life. And we do it in different ways, or maybe we could think of it as different degrees of scope. So we have the Buddha's teachings to his son Rahula that demonstrate a pattern of self-reflection about our thoughts and words and actions. You may know this sutta, it's from the Middle Length Discourses. I think it's number 61, maybe. But it's that time when the commentary tells us that Rahula was probably about 7 years old at the time. So shortly after he came to live with the Buddha, with his father and the monks. And it seems pretty obvious from that discourse. Many of you, I'm sure, know this story very well, but it's pretty obvious that little Rahula, told a lie. And then the Buddha came to see him at his kuti, at his hut, and talked to him about the importance of truth and how the holy life doesn't mean much of anything if you're willing to tell a deliberate lie. In fact, you can't trust someone who's willing to tell a deliberate lie for anything. But then he talks about how we should reflect upon what we are going to say or do or even think, like the thoughts we put energy into, we think intentionally, not the ones that just pop into our head out of who knows where, karma, whatever. But the thoughts that we actually choose to think, that before we do it, we should reflect on whether it's going to cause harm to ourselves or others. And he said, if you think it's going to be harmful, then don't do it. That's pretty simple, huh? I just heard from someone not long ago who was really dealing with some choice that was very tempting, but unwholesome. And he was talking about this at a Baigiri, and he said he got so much help from Ajahn Yanako because he just said, don't do it. That was his advice. And he's like, wow, that's really great. Like, yeah, there you go. So we can tell ourselves, like, don't do it. And it's correct and helpful. And then the Buddha said, while you're speaking or acting or thinking about something, reflect upon whether it's causing harm for yourself or someone else. And then if it is, stop. And after speaking, acting, thinking, you look back and you think, was that harmful in any way? And he said, if it was, he'd only talked about speech and bodily action in this case, not thought. But if for speech and bodily action, then if you did something harmful, you go to a senior monk, a good friend, and you confess it and make the determination not to do that again. So this is a really beautiful practice that we can all do. And it's at the level of our specific, individual actions. But then there are other levels of self-reflection, or reflecting upon our life. We reflect upon our livelihood, for example. Those kind of bigger pieces, reflect upon our relationships and how we are showing up in them. And, how we might show up even more kindly or more ethically, or, with more generosity, for example. It's another kind of level or scope of our self-reflection. And then there's the scope of reflection on our growth and development, on our development on the path, our purpose in life. I knew a young man, I call him young because I'm old now. He was approaching 40, and he said, I'm having a midlife reassessment of trying to avoid a midlife crisis. And I think it actually works, I think a crisis often comes because we've been, consumed by or focused on or caught up in life flowing along without having really taken stock maybe for some time. And it's easy to do. And this is where we intersect with Socrates a bit. He's like, if you're just following along, doing what you're told, what kind of life is that? Is that worth living? And if we think about, what makes life worth living, I don't know where you're at with it, but the conclusion I've come to is it's the development of the mind. It's following the path. It's awakening. That's really what makes it worth living, because everything else that's good in life follows along with that. It comes automatically. And that's also what we carry with us when we die. The development of the mind, the development of our character and our karma, the turning of our karmic stream more and more to the wholesome, more and more to what's good. So that's kind of the biggest scope, you might say, lifetimes. And of course, this is not about a self-identity succeeding somehow. This is about letting go of that self-identity and really seeing that we're part of something much larger. These choices that we make in this lifetime, in this present moment, have a resonance, an impact, reverberation that is worth directing in a positive way, a way that's helpful and hopeful and bringing good, more and more good, and not contributing to the hatred and greed and delusion of the world, but contributing to its opposites. So there are ways that self-reflection can sort of be beneficial or not. And it's good to always think about, well, what are the potential kind of pitfalls or gotchas when we look at any practice. And so one of the things that I think is really important, having engaged in self-reflection that's both beneficial and also the other side, where we're actually beating ourselves up. This is this is not a good thing. It falls into that very first category of, you know, thinking in a way that's harmful. And then, you know, like telling ourselves, don't do that. Don't do that. So it's like bringing kindness to it, doing this self-reflection in a way that's kind and supportive. And of course, we find things we want to correct, but to really see them just as things we can improve and correct, but have a lot of reflection also on the good, the things that we're doing that are positive, and the things that we have in our life and our experience that are blessings and really wonderful. And there's, you know, in terms of self-reflection, there's also Ajahn Chah's quote, at least what I've heard, that Ajahn Chah said. He said, don't focus on other people, focus on yourself, on your own behavior. He said 95% of your focus should be on your own behavior and not on that of others. And that 5%, of course, we can use that in a positive way to see what's beneficial or not, what's wholesome or unwholesome in the way other people are acting or speaking, and realize immediately, this is something that Ajahn Panyawado said, immediately turn it around and ask, do I do that? How am I doing that? And to really be willing, open, even eager to see where we can make improvements. Not to beat ourselves up, but to really thrive, to really develop the mind. And I like that, because a lot of times we can see what's going on when we look at someone else, when we can cut through our own delusion by first seeing the behavior in someone else and then turning around and really seeing it in ourselves. And then that's where we can make the correction. We don't want to waste time complaining about other people or the circumstances of life. We need to be well aware of them, but then always looking at what we have control over, our own thoughts, words, and actions. That's what we can control. That's what we have agency over. So we want to put our attention there, but in a way that's wholesome. Another way that we get sidetracked or caught up is by thinking we already know. I mean, sometimes that's a coping mechanism or a strategy to protect ourselves, but it's actually terribly detrimental. If we've got the idea that, oh, I know it all already, we're not going to see what we're really doing. And sometimes, even when people ask questions, they're not real questions. They don't really want to know the answer. They just want a validation for their views. Now, if we see ourselves doing that, we want to really just drop it, drop this kind of idea and go back to some, you know, like much more willingness to actually see more deeply. Because if we're still suffering, there's still things we don't have the right idea about. And so this is always the gauge. This is why the Buddha really talks so much about, you know, using suffering as the flag, the red flag that helps us recognize that there's more to learn. There's something here that I need to adjust. Because regardless of what happens to us, there can be a lot of pain, and there can be a lot of challenges, but we don't have to suffer. That comes from some misunderstanding of reality. So when we notice that there's dukkha, then we have an opportunity. And if we hold it that way, like, okay, I can experience this from the perception or the position of the Dhamma. And that's really what's key. All of these kind of levels of scope of self-reflection. We want to, well, how does the Dhamma inform this? Or how can I see this from the perspective of Dhamma? Until that's the only way we look at things. It's not through our greed, hatred, and delusion, but through the lens of Dhamma. Self-reflection has a huge place in just about everything on the path. And without it, we're lost. And without the willingness to find out that we're wrong, or see what we misunderstand, or and acknowledge our faults, we are really stuck. We can spin for a long time without making much progress if we are unwilling to be vulnerable, really, to not necessarily making ourselves vulnerable in ways that are unwholesome or dangerous, but that vulnerability to recognize, to admit that we don't know, or that we're still experiencing dukkha. We're not fully awake yet. That's okay. That's the way through, to really accept seeing ourselves as we are. And then bringing that kindness and compassion to take care of ourselves, to be understanding, to be kind, to be supportive of ourselves, and let go of the past. So we can use the past to learn, and that's enough. And then, like Ajahn Ghana says, just cut off those thoughts of the past. And I had that question in my mind about whether our way of thinking increases the negative karma of what we've done in the past. And Ajahn Ghana has said something like that. It's like you just keep it going in your mind, and it keeps it alive and keeps it kind of building up. And we're more likely to have problems with the same thing in the future. So take Ajahn Brahm's method: acknowledge, forgive, and learn, and just drop it. So those are some thoughts. How we can use this amazing capacity of the human mind to look at ourselves, and what an integral part it is, what a tool it is for our growth and development. And we don't have to be so dependent on other people when we are, well practiced in self-reflection. When the Buddha talks about how we can become independent of others in the Dhamma. So to know the Dhamma, and of course that knowing directly comes with the stream entry experience, to really see the Dhamma and not have any doubts about it. So for all of us, that's an important focus. Like if we if we feel we have doubts about the Dhamma, to really dig deep into opening to fuller understanding. Make ourselves available for those insights to arise by practicing the whole Noble Eightfold Path, every aspect of it. Sometimes it's useful to ask, okay, what's the weakest link for me right now in the Noble Eightfold Path? Which one needs some bolstering or more time and attention? And continue to provide the right nourishment for our mind, for our life. Regardless of our age, regardless of our situation, these are things we can do. And of course, I'm speaking to people who are already interested and know a lot. So this is meant as encouragement for all of us.